fortunate to have one of our best and brightest and most successful online professors with us today, Dr. Celeste Landeros, and Dr. Larson, who are going to talk to us a little bit, and we'll end up with a Q&A session. The questions you have about teaching online. And the wrap around this whole experience is about, well, what are the best practices? What works? You know, how do you get past 101? I'm not going to make the rookie mistakes. I'm going to jump right into being the same quality teacher and professor I am in the classroom face-to-face online. And so Celeste is going to share her wisdom and experiences with us. And we also maybe even use some guided presentation along the way to dig into some deeper questions. So, Jeff, you want to kick us off?
Well, I'm really pleased that Celeste has offered to come over here today and to talk to us a little bit about this. We thought this would be just kind of a nice approach for you to address any questions you have about challenges, experiences, and what she has found has worked and what hasn't worked. So this is just a good opportunity for the next half hour to talk about that. I don't know if you have any general questions that you'd like to just start out with that Celeste could answer, I could answer, Randy. Earlier on in the session we said, write down some questions you might have, and we said we'd take just a little bit of a deep breath, and that's the time to do that right now. And are there any general questions that you have for us at this time?
Maybe what were your biggest challenges when you were, starting out? What was like the thing that drove you crazy the most, maybe?
Yeah, that's cool. I'm going to turn that over to you.
So I've been teaching online for almost 10 years. They had started a few years before I came at Barry and Pace teaching online, and so they wanted me to convert the writing course. And that was actually a perfect course to convert, because writing is what you do when you're not face-to-face. And one of the challenges for me is I get very ambitious and creative and wanted certain things to happen that I don't know still is possible to happen. So one thing was sort of getting used to what's possible and what's not possible. I understand that this is a group from education, right? So you all know about scaffolding. And one of the most exciting things that was challenging for me at first was figuring out how to use the online course shell for scaffolding. So the two things that I've figured out is that you want to have, for me what's worked really well is to have almost the same thing happening from week to week. So the discussion forum is set up in the same way, but have it get more intensive and more profound. So to address your question directly, I think one of the biggest challenges at first was figuring out how to translate what happens in the classroom to the shell. And the way that I was able to do that was by consistency and scaffolding within that consistency.
Can you speak a little bit to what some of the students say, what their experiences are like, I guess on their end, and how they do their learning is happening when it's the difference between, I guess, the traditional and what have you done to address some of those concerns?
So another big challenge of teaching online is that it's more intensive. It's more time intensive for the students, and it's more time intensive for the faculty. Why that happens is because there's actually, I think, more learning possibilities. Right now, you ask me a question and I'm answering you. Nobody else can speak, right? So in the amount of time that we have, my classes are 4 hours, you might have a 50-hour session. Every minute is taken up by one person at a time. Or you might have group work and then report back. Online, every student has to respond to every discussion forum, so you're not having that time crunch. Every student is engaged in ways that maybe they're engaged listening in the classroom, but they are actively engaged by whether you're doing a writing or whatever kind of assignment you're doing. So what I find is that there's a more intense kind of learning that happens online. Now what can happen, especially with students who are taking their first online course, is they'll panic. There's a kind of technology panic. I teach a film class where it's film appreciation, but I have them make a 3-minute, 47-second film. because the class is called Art 347. And this is a panic you might be familiar with, where people are like, oh, I don't know how to use Facebook, or I don't know how to send a video. But if the person tries it, it takes them less time to figure it out than it takes them to be anxious about trying it. Does that make sense? There's a kind of technology panic time suck that you have to deal with when students come in and they're freaking out, not because what they have to do is difficult, but because it's overwhelming to think about doing it. And so that's where some hand-holding comes in. And what I've ended up doing over the terms is making an orientation video. So we have synchronous sessions where students are all supposed to come online at the same time. And sometimes they do and sometimes they don't. And the most panicked ones sometimes can't figure that out on time. And so we record those for students who can't come. And then I started actually making recordings that any student could look at any time that tells exactly what's going on in the course. So the biggest barrier for students is the panic before they try. And if you can find a way to address that panic by giving them some simple steps up front, and I find the way for me to do that is by making a video that just says, here are the steps, and you can go back and look at this again. And then again, doing the same thing every week, but at different intensity. Then you find you have more intense learning sometimes than you do in the face-to-face situation.
Tell us a little bit about the students during the first week. What kind of questions do you get? Do you see frustration? Or do you have things built in to better deal with that? Just what's that first week like? Maybe what's that first week like for you too?
Right. So again, because there's students that are just freaked out to begin with, they will have a hard time even just looking at the material that you have there. So I'm ready for phone calls. I'm ready for some hand-holding. You're going to have other students at the other end of the spectrum who've done this before, they know the drill. You may never hear from them. I mean, you'll hear from them in terms of the actual conducting of the class, but they're never going to have any questions about anything. But there's going to be a few students that you're just going to have to talk to on the phone and walk them through it. Every term I try to find new ways to add things into my intro video, frequently asked questions, that kind of thing. You know, how can I get less confusion? But it's never going to go away, I don't think, because there's always going to be people that aren't even going to look at it, and they're going to freak out. So after that first week, you can see who's been on, and you can see who's done something and who hasn't done something. So at every point, you can look and get a report on how much time a student has spent online. Now maybe they turned it on and then they cooked dinner and they watched a movie and it seems like they're on there a long time. It doesn't necessarily mean they're engaged all that time, but it's how much time they have it open. You can see somebody who opened it and closed it. You can see who never opened it. So after the first week, I will call all the people that haven't done anything and say, or I'll email them. I'll email them first, and then if I get some that I still haven't heard back from, you know, someone will say, oh, I was at a conference and I just didn't get around to it yet. But you'll get those ones that just freaked out. And then you can try to talk about the ledge and get them into the course.
My question has to do with the adjustment to have to teach from what I call, not disrespectfully, a canned syllabus. One that's been prepared for it. And my concern is the delivery of the product. Now, in every syllabus, there are those general things that the university sets up. And then there's the delivery, which has to do with professors' academic freedom, so to speak.
Right.
How have you adjusted to having to teach from a syllabus that has been, that's it? You might have been involved in the preparation of your syllabus, and that makes a difference because you would then set that syllabus based on your comfort level and how you want to approach it. But the I think will be those of us who will be teaching from a canned syllabus, and it doesn't give you that creative ability to adjust things to the style that you teach. Because I think each of us in here will teach perhaps differently. And so my biggest concern is my ability to be able to put my creativity in there, but yet arrive at the same conclusion at the end.
So I have two responses. The first is just acknowledging a trade-off. I have recently converted 2 new courses. So before I would create a course and then maybe another faculty would teach it and they might change some things up. But now we're doing the master syllabus. And so I put a lot more work into not the syllabus per se, but the actual building out of the course. I don't know if you can pull up anything, either the Hume 303 or the Art 347. Hours and hours and hours and hours of labor. And I have a colleague who's also full-time faculty, and you know, we've worked together. She hired me, we respect each other very much, and she's teaching this course right now. And it's in a film class, so I chose the films, and they're not all her favorite films. So I said, at some point, I'm sure we can work it out where you could switch out a film that would do the same kind of work, but know that that also means you have to put in that amount of effort to create the beautiful course. So the trade-off is, in an online course, your success is going to be related to how much effort you put in on the front end. That means if you're coming in and teaching a course that already exists, then you have faith in the team here that they've got something really great on the front end. We'll see when it comes up, and you can see the extent to which I went. So that trade-off is, do you want to put in the gazillions of hours to build this shell so that you do have your stamp on it, or do you want to find another way to put your stamp on it? So where the teaching during the, how many weeks are they teaching in education?
Some will be 7, some will be longer.
So let's say the
7.
7 weeks.
7.
So during that 7-week period, where your teaching comes in is, for me, it's in the responses. And this is something that might be unusual that I do. I don't respond to the students' forums as a forum commenter. So if you're not familiar with the discussion forum, that's where a lot happens. So I set up the questions, I set up the formula, so it looks like we're getting into the film class. So for the film class, every week they have to talk about the plot of the film, they have to talk about the form of the film, which is the camera angles and all that kind of stuff, which is something I teach them. And then they have to talk about the cultural reflection of the film. How does it reflect culture? They do that every single week, and that's all set up ahead of time. Where I come in when I'm actually teaching it, or any faculty who's teaching it, is how I respond to the students. So if you open, so first, this is the big labor, right? You can see I have all of these videos. For example, just click on shot composition. I didn't make this, I curated this. I do have videos that I made in here, but I have videos that I found online.
I just created a Wix website for my business. Let me show you how I did it. Let's go to Wix.com.
So this is an amazing video that teaches students about shot composition that I would have to make my careers make. That is the amount of time I would have to spend to do something as cool and engaging and important as this piece. So anyway, he goes through and he shows what composition is, so we can stop having to go back. So I went and curated all of the videos that I thought went with all the things that I wanted the students to learn. That's already done, that's in the can, as you say. But that week, after they go through all of that, keep going down, then they're gonna watch some short films, then here's the lesson activities. So this is canned, a lot of hours. This is you. And so they take the quiz grades itself, which I love. It's really a reading aid. So what I do with quizzes is I don't use it, you guys are the experts in education. I don't use it for, I guess, the evaluative to see how much they learned. I use it for them to learn. What do you call that? Summative. So they can take that quiz over and over until they get the stuff. So that would be the time I would spend in the classroom going. Sometimes I teach what are called flex classes. I don't know if they're going to be something you'll do in education, where we have some people face-to-face and we have some people online, and it's happening live. So I'm also used to that. Like, performing for that, I'm performing for the people in the room. Okay, so if we go into the film forum, Here I have my platform culture. I adapt it each week. It gets more intense each week. It's about the actual film that we're talking about that week. They're going to come here and they're going to reply. So this is a class that someone else is teaching this summer. So he's got someone, or maybe one in the past, giving his answers. My favorite thing that ever happened in me teaching online is something called SpeedGrader. Can we go in here and click SpeedGrader? Right here. And the dot, dot, dots.
This is part of the grade book.
Over here, oh, this is me. So this is me responding to the students. So the discussion forum, the way it's always been presented to me in these kinds of workshops, is a place where the students are talking to each other and then the faculty comes in and talks. What I found out is that almost no student, or at least the vast majority of students, will not read anything that is not addressed to them directly. So I would say, oh, I can answer Corey, and that'll also address Letitia's issue. And Letitia's not going to look at anything that is for Corey. That has been my experience. Because I would cry, I'm not literally cry, but like, I said that, I said you were supposed to do that, or I said this should be that way, and nobody will look. So with SpeedGrader, for each one, they're having their discussion forum. So imagine a classroom in which the students are all having their group discussion. And I'll monitor to see if, I've never, ever, ever had rudeness. I've never had any of these netiquette issues. I don't know if it's just the student population that we have. So I've never had to deal with that, but I would definitely step in if there was any kind of issue with people being mean to each other. Sometimes if there's something that's factually wrong, yes, I'll jump in there. But again, I'm not counting on everybody reading anything I respond to anybody. Because the way the discussion forum works is Corey writes something, and then Letitia will respond, and then Jose will respond to Letitia. So if I respond, it's going to be to somebody specific. And the other 29 people are not going to look. So I come in on these comments, and I'm like, that's where I am teaching. Okay, you got that. Wow, that was really smart, or this was really interesting, or not quite. Why don't you go back and look at that video? So all of that kind of stuff is happening in the comments. If there's something I feel is really important to get to everybody, can we go to announcements? Announcements, you can't overuse them, but they get emailed out to everybody. So if there is some important big factual issue or something that has to be addressed to everybody, I'll put that in the announcements and it goes out. Okay, so somebody will say the link for this Moonlight video isn't coming up, so I can send that out to everybody. So building the thing happens before the class is taught. And it's a lot of heavy lifting. And it might be the case that what you want to do is get into a place where you're doing the course development yourself. But the actual teaching is very different. And the trade-off is I would not every 7 weeks want to build a class because it's so much work. But every 7 weeks, I'm then freed up from building that curriculum to engaging with the student individually on everything that they post. And thanks to SpeedGrader, I can get to them directly. Now, of course, I still have students that don't know where to find SpeedGrader. You know, I'll see, oh my gosh, why are they not doing this thing I recommended, the last 2 weeks? And then I'll call them or email them like, oh, I didn't know where those comments were. Another thing you can do, if we go back, let's go to assignments. So with the scaffolding, I have them in this particular class. They do a discussion forum every week. They do a major paper, and they do a video that they make. And I really don't teach them how to create the video. I give them all kinds of online resources to do it. And they're not graded on the quality of them. It's not an Oscar. It's just, did you try? And we might look at one of those because they're super cute. But with these big papers, I break them down. So the first thing they do is they pick a genre of film. And they look in the chapter and they write about the characteristics of that genre and how their film fits it. Then the next week they import that into the next draft where they start to talk about the plot. Then the next week they incorporate it in the next draft where they talk about the form. So it's that scaffolding where it's a big project at the end, but I'm giving them assignments every week to get to that end. Now, some people doing the online thing are doing it because they want to do it all at the last week. I don't know what Dr. Larson feels about this. I don't care. They cannot get credit for the discussion forums responses. So for each forum, they have an original post that's worth 5 points. They can turn that in late and lose a point. They get 3 points for responding, 1 each to 3 people. If they don't do that on time, they don't get points for that because that discussion is over, right? Mm-hmm. But if they decide they don't care, they're going to do it in a week, they're going to do all their discussion forums, they're going to make their movie, they're going to write the thing, fine, I don't care. I'll give them the same grade backwards. Does that make sense? So let's say they got an 80 on the final thing, I'll give them 80 for every piece of that backwards. So I'm building this to help them get to that final paper, but I don't want to penalize them if they haven't gotten there. And there's a certain kind of personality that's doing online because they just want to do it completely on their timetable. And so I try to accommodate both the kind of person that needs the step-by-step, the build-up, and that can benefit it. I think you're always going to get a better paper if you write it week by week. But the student that is, especially students that are super smart, and they just want to do it fast, and they can do all the work, and it's quality work, I'm not going to penalize them because they didn't do it. Yeah.
Now, if they're not doing the discussions, what would be the highest possible grade? If they're just doing that and waiting to the end, how would that impact their grade?
So the discussion forum is worth 8 points a week. And 3 of those points are for responding to each other, and 5 are for their original post. So they can still get 4. They get 1 point off of the 5 if it's after that week. They can't get the 3. So that means the most they can get is 50% on that portion, which I think is worth like 30% of the grade. So they'll get docked 15%.
But doesn't that go in back grade what they didn't do in a particular week? But pressure on the professor. Because if in week 1 you were supposed to do X,
Right.
you didn't do it, then let's say a student waits until the last week of class, and I've seen students try to do it, to answer all of the discussion questions and respond, then it puts, I think, an extra load on the professor.
Well, that's up to you. And I have adjunct faculty that teach the same classes that I build, who I know are saying you can't do it. So that is absolutely, I don't even want to call it academic freedom, it's just workload regulation, how you decide to regulate your own workload. So it's completely valid if you say you can't turn in a late assignment, but that's just not how I am in general. Probably because I'm more of a last minute.
Well, if you give me proof that you had a medical situation, family
that
emergency.
stuff is entirely up to you.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, so that is never in the can. How you deal with that is up to you.
Right.
And frankly, I get tired of hearing about their situations, so I'd rather just say turn it in. I don't care what your situation is, this is when I have to turn your final grade in.
I wonder if we could talk, I like how you set up scaffolding. We're seeing a lot of online instructors now moving away from traditional multiple choice exams each week, high stakes and low stakes, and actually just building in more project-oriented assignments each week until maybe it finally builds up into a capstone. That's kind of what you're doing with it. I wonder if we could talk just for a few minutes about academic integrity and cheating online, and how maybe your model might move away from cheating or the ease of cheating versus how you feel about assessments, without getting into too much of a debate about it. I think it's worth talking about.
So there's different kinds of cheating, as you all know. There's a kind of cheating that I'm not convinced that they don't or do know that they're doing, which is the copy and pasting from online, and especially in the discussion forums. I will say to them, and I'll put it in there, and I say to my orientation, I'm interested in what you think, what you see, what you hear. I do not want to see what you found on, especially with film, there's all kinds of stuff online that they can cut and paste in there. So I'll give them a 0, and again, because it doesn't bother me to do it, I'll say you can redo it, or if it does bother me a certain term, I can't redo it. But some of them seem to honestly, especially in our population of adult learners, not know that they're not supposed to be cutting and pasting. So I'll usually give them at least one option to do that. And it's super easy. We've got the Turnitin integrated, but even in the discussion forum when there's no Turnitin, you can tell. I can tell that it's coming from someone else. So there's that. There's the kind of trying to get a written paper already from somewhere else. But we have to turn it in from that. The one thing that I don't know how to deal with at all, and I've only felt like I've dealt that I know about it once. Well, I was at a cocktail party at a friend's, and people were saying, "Oh yeah, I took her math class and I took his lit class." So people who just wholesale take another class for somebody, it's not stuff that's already out there in the world. It's I don't know what you do. We have synchronous sessions, and there was one person in all these years who I felt like his wife was taking the class for him. And it might be my own prejudice. I just like thought, this is not a guy. Like this.
Writing is not from a
And
guy.
she even at one point said something about her husband, but I didn't know what to do with that.
Can you imagine?
You can try to see them online, and I did think about, should I call him up and say, hey, I want to talk to you, and maybe that's what I should have done, to have to see, like you would, because any student, I know people when I went to school, it was only face-to-face, who paid other people to write their papers. And I don't know what you do at that extreme. But when you have them engaged in the projects, they can't just insert a paper that they bought from some service online. And even if they try to come in with them, I teach writing online sometimes, when they do the composition class, and they might come in with something that they wrote clearly from another class, or they bought somewhere, but we do so many revisions, like fine, start with that, but it's gonna go somewhere else. I don't always have just writing as the assignments. So for the film class, like I said, I have them make a film. And that means they have to apply those concepts. It might not be beautiful, but they have to learn the rule of thirds, so they have to have a shot. And it's also scaffolded in now, where the first week they have to upload a shot that uses the rule of thirds, upload a close-up, upload a long shot, and they're doing that little by little as they go.
Yeah, typically we've found that if a course is designed with final paper, but there's no previous writing or drafting or anything involved in that writing process, I don't want to say it's easy, but it's likely that you're going to get some students that will plagiarize that. And maybe you'll unnoticed simply because we haven't done our due diligence in coursing and scaffolding or alternative project-based assignments throughout all the other modules of the course. So one of the things that we're working on now with our workshops coming up is to develop a workshop specifically that looks at assessment strategies in online courses. We're really excited actually to get feedback from faculty more than, we don't know as much as the faculty do because they're in the trenches with assessment strategies every day online. So this is I think a terrific area for us to take advantage of and become one in terms of how we can approach this.
Some of the courses that are already being taught face-to-face already do that they build, let's say, one long-term assignment that is chunked into multiple stages of that assignment. And I think that helps you to give the feedbacks early on so that you're making those corrections and it's a living draft kind of until the very end.
And I think as online instructors, and Celeste can verify this, you get to know your students. You really did. You really do. When you think online and virtual that you don't know, you can tell by how they're writing. You get a sense of what they're going through in their day-to-day life, because they will probably email you at the same time in the evening. Okay, you get a little ding on your cell phone at 9:30. I know who that is. Yeah.
Do you have students complete group assignments, and if so, how do they present it, or how do they get others in the class engaged in your work?
That's something I think we had a second connection, because I was just thinking about that. So for a while, I have a humanities course that covers all of the arts for the 20th and 21st century. In now 7 weeks, it was 8 weeks. So crazy, just crazy amount of coverage. And again, I want them to do 3 things every week. I want them to look at the text, the context, and the subtext. And for them to learn what the subtext is, figure it out, what's the difference between text and context, it takes them a couple of weeks. And for a while, I had them do that as a group project. So they might have 5 people. They'd be looking at 3 works of art for the text, the context, and the subtext. So they could divvy it up however they wanted, and one person's job was to edit it all together. The quality of the work that I got with those group assignments was the highest I've ever gotten. Not just in their group assignments. So for every week, they would do a group assignment and then put it in the discussion forum. And then when they did their individual papers at the end, they were far and away better than when they're doing the individual assignments the whole term. The problem that I had with that, and the reason I stopped doing it, was because I could do it, but when I handed it to an adjunct, the kind of management that I had to do, again, it was a lot of the anxiety more than anything else. Why do I have to be in a group if this person doesn't do it? And so I would say from the outset, you got a group of 5, so hopefully 3 people are going to come through for you, 3 of you. But even if nobody does, and sometimes it would happen, only one person would do all the work. It's not going to be any different than if you was an individual assignment from the beginning. So I will give you the assignment just to you for what you did, and online you can see what everyone's doing. But the management of the group stuff was okay for me, and I found when I handed it off to adjuncts, there would be so many complaints that they weren't managing it, that it's something I want to revisit, and maybe looking more at the group. There's group things in here, which is also something you have to keep track of, because if you set up groups, then people can't see if they're not in the group, and if I forget somebody or something like that, then they're like, nothing's in my thing. And I do, if I have a big class, I use Canvas even if I'm doing face-to-face. And one secret I've learned is that my face-to-face students don't complain about doing the same amount of online work as the distance ones. Let me clarify that. I just use the same class, whether it's face-to-face or online. And so if it's face-to-face, we have 4 hours a week in class to talk about things, but we're still doing the same amount of work online. I haven't taken it out because I find it so valuable, the online part, and nobody's complained from the face-to-face, so I just keep doing it. So if I were to have this class, whether face-to-face or online, doing discussion forums, I would put you in groups. I might put you in groups of 5. Not that you're doing group work, but you can't get to know each other, right? So you're responding to her every time, or you're responding to somebody different. It's too amorphous, I feel like, when it's a big group. So the most extreme group project I did is when they were in groups working together every week, and it was incredibly successful, but incredibly challenging. An intermediary kind of group work I do is where I just put them in groups for their forums, so that they have a learning community, let's say. And I find that the group work at any level always improves the individual work.
Is there a space for the group work to happen?
Yeah, they have, we're in a quote. I haven't even used this collaborations thing, because we've used 3 different learning management systems while I've been here. And I fell so in love with SpeedGrader, which is only in Canvas, that I haven't looked to see their collaborations thing very much. But yeah, there's a space where they can do that.
Is there a space for one-to-one discussions, aside from the...
There's a chat, right? Which I haven't used either.
But would that mean that other students could see the chat? I mean more like if you had to say something specific to a student and you didn't want anybody else to see it.
Oh, well, I'll use the phone a lot, and I'll use email. I think they should.
Reflection journal will also do that. Reflection journal is just individual, that student and the professor.
Oh, yeah.
So that they can respond.
And then assignments are just student and professor, but you can make a peer review function that I use sometimes. And I love the random peer review. So then they'll get a link in their assignment of the person's paper they're supposed to review. So nobody sees my comments on SpeedGrader. That's why I love it, because I don't want to make personal evaluative comments that everybody can see.
Okay.
But before we had SpeedGrader, then I'd have to go to email and remember what I wanted to say, and it just was too much for me. But with SpeedGrader, you go right there and they are the only ones that see it.
I wanted to just do one more question. This morning we watched a video from State University of New York System, and it was the myths of online teaching. One of the myths is that teaching online is easier than teaching face-to-face, and you don't need as much time to teach online. Of course, we don't think that's true. But the question I have for you is, tell us a little bit about time management when you teach online. There must be some tricks that you do to make it more efficient without sacrificing the feedback and quality you want from the students. But typically, what does your week look like? And what do you think you put in hourly? And that, of course, varies from instructor to instructor. Give us a sense of what your week is.
Well, I read fast and I write fast. I'm a professional writer and editor, so I feel like I can do it really fast. I do definitely mix up my schedule, so I have online and face-to-face, because sometimes I just want that 4 hours and done. Even though, like I said, I make them do the discussion panels and all of that. It's more intense, it's more time intensive to teach online, but if you have the things structured ahead of time to minimize the amount of questions that you're getting, to get the maximum clarity, so that what I found was the more I added for them to look at in terms of videos, the more, like I just showed you that composition video, they have a chapter in the book that talks about composition shots. But just like any chapter, did they read it at all? Did they understand it? I still require the chapter, but the more supplementary material I added, the stronger their responses were. So I found that by having them have more to work with, their responses were better. And that cuts my time down in responding. So if you start out with them not knowing what you're asking them to do, then it's going to be more work for you on the back end of fixing it, right? But the more clarity you give them ahead of time, and the more intensive material, they're willing to do it. And then they come out with more clarity for you to grade.
Okay. Final question. What makes you a good online instructor? What's the one thing that you're really proud of yourself in teaching your course, and students comment on that a lot?
I think that I have a lot of fun with the subject, and I'm really interested in what they have to say. So I get excited by the kinds of things that they bring. And it's amazing to me, you get these different personalities every term that take the questions in ways that I never would have anticipated. So on the one hand, you save time as you do it because there's kind of a set of responses you're giving over and over. Oh, please go into more depth. Please talk about 3 things. This is not form. This is what you say these same things over and over. But then you've always got a few students that give you something new and exciting. And because I get excited about it, I think the students get excited about it.
Couple questions, so a little bit of time.
I know we like to talk about our successes, and I tend to learn from my failures. Can you tell us one thing that truly blew up in your face as it pertains to online courses?
Good question.
I don't know that anything blew up in my face, but in the adjunct spaces. So getting back to that question of the CAN course, that whole group experience. I don't know if I did not train the adjuncts adequately in how to handle that, but I have to be conscious when I design the course that it's not just me understanding it, and I have to really build it out. I know you put up the course that I taught, but if you can put up the master. So the master, we did conversions from 8 weeks to 7 weeks. And that sounds like it should be easy, right? You're just going to squeeze them a little. But I took it as an opportunity, and I'm sure my colleagues did as well. Yeah. Either one, do Art 337 for 3 master, please. Because I want to show you guys just a little video. So it goes back to that idea of clarity. What blows up in my face is where I haven't given them enough information. And then they get anxious, and then I get phone calls. And so a lot of what I've done in each iteration is just lowering the anxiety level as much as possible by being as clear as possible. You had a question?
Yeah, in your opinion, most underrated film of the 20th century?
Underrated?
What is?
Whitnell and I. Whitnell and I, it's a British film, it's really good. Yes?
You mentioned earlier that the class that you're teaching had textbooks, physical books. Have you seen a need to change from online textbook format to teach an online class?
Well, a lot of students use online, there's an online version of the classes, so it's not necessarily on paper that they're working with. We have a class that I'm going to be converting, that's kind of a great ideas class, and I feel like why do we have a textbook for that? Because there's open access to Plato and to Machiavelli and all of that stuff. But with the film class and with this humanities textbook in particular, there's such good textbooks that they give so much of the information. I don't count on the student reading it. I know some students aren't going to read it, and so I duplicate that information with the videos. But if a student does read it, it's so well done. Both of those texts are so well done that I don't feel yet that I can just get rid of it and have them have the same benefit. Okay, so if we go into, I'll just take you on a quick tour to show you the extent of the content. Yeah, just start. So this is stuff that they built, but if we go to about, they be the distance education team that tells them all about how this works. But this is for the course itself, about this course. So this is a crazy video of me. And it's really just a video of me addressing all of the questions that I would get term after term after term and trying to nip it in the bud. And I made it myself.
Did you take this yourself?
I did. I did it on my bike. The dolly shot was me on my bike. So I just walked them through the syllabus and all of that. And then we go on from there. There should be more about that course. So this is all stuff that you guys are very familiar with, right? Your objectives. But then go back. What I want to show them is the course resources. Maybe we have number 4. Here we go. Thank you. Yes, beautiful. So I spent a lot of time on this, making sure they had places to go to the films, but then go down. So here's my toolbox for analyzing film. This is something I created for the other course as well. Something like this I'll create for every course. You think about what is the skill you want them to get. It's going to be independent of the content, at least for what I do. What is the skill that you want? So in this toolbox, you can click here, or there, or on the picture. You give them lots of options. These are all of the videos that they're going to see over the whole term and the glossary in one place. So if they need to go back, they can go back. There's this kind of spiral. Then go back. And then this I also created. Tips for making your 347 film. Yes, you are producing your own film. Because that is something that will sometimes be met with disbelief. And so I just gathered stuff for them to put together to make their own videos. And let's just go, this is the video I love the best, or one of them that I love the best, because it's terrible in terms of production value. It's also slightly illegal. She's using some Gwen Stefani there. But it's showing all the things that they need to show. So we have a dissolve and a zoom.
Did your students make this?
My students, all of them have to make a film. So they have to write a paper and they have to make a film. And again, they do that in point after point. So we can stop there. But it's a cute film about Barbie's life when everyone's away. So they have a rubric that's the same things they do when they analyze Hollywood films that they have to then create in their own film. And it can be as terrible as they want, but as long as they have a plot, they have a close-up. So, and online, I've done a lot of digital publishing, working with new media startups, and I'm not gonna say the phrase right, I'll paraphrase, but it's better to just start, get it out there, no matter how bad it is, and then come back and fix it. And so 7 weeks go by fast, and then they come around again, and they come around again, and then you start to figure out, how do I clean this up? So maybe nothing blew up in my face, but I'm constantly saying, how can I not get these emails? How can I not get these phone calls? What can I put in place?
In our world, we call it going out ugly.
Okay.
Going out ugly.
The more proactive you are up front, the less on the back end.
Exactly, but you can't know ahead of time what you need to put up front necessarily.
Any last comments? Celeste, thank you so
Really
much.
much.